couple who he had his own business. She was a police officer, was diagnosed with leukemia. Obviously, we couldn't get income protection for her being in the police force, so we increased her trauma cover. And I remember actually printing off all the documents at that point and actually going to the hospital that she was in and sat with her by her bedside, completed all the claim forms, submitted the claim, trauma was paid out, and then under the police force they have a 6 or 8 month income protection that they provide. And within 12 months she'd passed away, so then we had to do the claim for the life cover.
Hey there, I'm Phil Thompson, and today we are interviewing Eddie from Skye. So thank you for joining me, Eddie.
No worries. Thanks, Phil.
So what's your role at Skye?
Advisor.
Yep, cool. And when did you join Skye?
April last year, so coming up to 10 months.
Yeah, cool. And fun fact, this is your second stint at Skye.
This is my second stint, yes.
Yeah.
I did another 9-month stint back in 2020, 2021 during COVID, and now I'm back.
Cool. And so how long have you been an advisor for?
So I moved into the risk space with financial planning back in 2004.
And were you an advisor before that? Like a holistic advisor?
Holistic advisor for 2 years, but been doing risk since 2004.
Yeah, cool. Seb was born in 2004.
I was going to say some of the stuff were probably born around that time. So
yeah, Seb's our youngest, so everyone else was born before that, but Seb was born in 04. I think we worked out he wasn't born during the Greece Olympics,
right,
which we both remember very vividly. So you've been doing insurance advice for a really long time. What's kind of what's the most impactful claim you've helped a client go through?
So probably the most important claim for me, which was a couple who he had his own business. She was a police officer, was diagnosed with leukemia. Obviously, we couldn't get income protection for her being in the police force, so we increased her trauma cover. And I remember actually printing off all the documents at that point and actually going to the hospital that she was in. And sat with her by her bedside, completed all the claim forms, submitted the claim, trauma was paid out, and then under the police force they have a 6 or 8 month income protection that they provide. And within 12 months she'd passed away, so then we had to do the claim for the life cover.
Yeah. And do you know how many claims you've helped clients with?
Thankfully, not a lot.
Yeah.
Probably around about the 20 mark.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. I mean, clients. It's the whole reason we sell people a bill. We help people, set up an ongoing annual bill that they pay. So when they need it, it's there.
Hopefully never have to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me about why you became an advisor.
So initially got into advice because I'd seen some family members going through some problems, both financially and setting themselves up for retirement. Mum and Dad was a classic example. And I had studied to be an accountant, and I was working as an accountant. And after them going to see a financial advisor, it was like, I really like what they do.
Yeah.
And then branched off kind of by accident into risk and wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. Why did you go specialize in insurance only advice? Was it you were working with a firm that placed you in that area? What was that like?
So I was working for one of the major banks at that point, and they had kind of branched out their offering to risk only. And the opportunity came up to look after a specific region. And to be completely honest with you, the investment side doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
I like to be able to sleep at night. And when I actually started in the industry for the first time with another bank, it was a couple of days before September 11.
Yeah, right.
And I had queues of people outside the door wanting to pull out their investments, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. So the risk opportunity came up, and that's where I've been ever since.
Yeah, I started in the industry like a few years after the great financial crisis. So 2010, 2011 is when, and so I hadn't experienced any of those phone calls but the advisor I was working with had kind of gone through that process. It's nothing like a market crash to kind of go, oh, do I really want to play in this space or not?
Yes, that was the thought I had.
Yeah.
And I wasn't comfortable with it.
What's some of the most challenging things about being a financial advisor?
I think everyone's favourite word is compliance. That seems to add a lot of intricacies to what we do. Challenges, look, with insurance, it's people's health. It's just making sure that we can try and get the best cover for them or the most appropriate cover. Doesn't necessarily come down to cost at that point, but just being able to kind of go through and get the most appropriate cover, which you then need to explain to the client as to why there might be exclusions and loadings and why the premiums might be more expensive. But that's really it for me.
Isn't your job just basically click and get a quote from 10 different companies and pick the cheapest?
Not necessarily.
And why not?
Simply because there's a lot of variables with insurance. It's the structure, it's the definitions within contracts, it's the pre-assessments that we receive back. So there is a lot of toing and froing and going through information and then trying to work out what's best for the client at that particular point.
Yeah. A lot of people think that investments are quite complex and insurance is the simple part of advice. And specializing in insurance, both done holistic advice. And as a holistic advisor, you kind of brush aside the insurance. It's just like, do we need $1 million of life and disability? And happy days, we'll pick the cheapest. But once you specialize in it, you kind of go, well, it's actually flipped the opposite way around. The complex thing is the insurance and how do you mix this health history versus, affordability. Can our clients afford it? And the investment side, it's like, well, just pick an index fund and, and make sure it's according to your asset allocation and you're comfortable with the risk profile and happy days.
Yes. And I remember always people saying insurance isn't sexy while investments are. But for me, it's laying the foundation, which is typically your personal insurances, your wills and estate planning. And then following that comes everything else in terms of investments and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the only questions I have for you. I guess what's one interesting hobby that you have?
I wouldn't say it's interesting, but I like to play tennis with my son.
Yeah.
So he's an avid tennis player. So that's really the only sport I get time to do.
Yeah.
And taking him around and doing things around the home. So if anything, it's tennis.
And I think, it would have been like, was it your first week we went to Bright with all the advisors, or your second week? It was like pretty early on. We all went to Bright and we played tennis, and you beat all of us. I think when we did our round robin, I think you were the clear winner in our tennis match.
Yeah, look, I think, as I said to my wife last week, if I had the opportunity to get proper lessons and practice as much as my son does, I'd like to think I could compete in the Masters.
Yeah. Well, it's never too late. You can
well,
always
the
do
aches
it.
and pains don't really help, but anyway.
And the time with the young family, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Eddie. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for your time.